Welcome to the Hud Grad Club. I'm Chris Webb, and I'm the Alumni Engagement Career Consultant with the University of Huddersfield's Careers Employability Service. And, full disclosure, I'm also a University of Huddersfield graduate. So I've generally got pretty positive things to say about both the institution and any of our graduates. But don't take my word for it. In this podcast, we'll be meeting different members of the University of Huddersfield's global alumni community, finding out what makes them tick, about their experiences during their time at the university and their career journeys since completing their studies. Join us as we explore the inspiring, innovative and diverse range of individuals that make up the Hud Grad Club. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hud Grad Club, our podcast celebrating the University of Huddersfield alumni community. And Mina, a very warm welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure to be back in contact again with the University of Huddersfield and with you. So I'm so glad to be doing this.
Oh, fantastic. Well, yeah, great to have you with us. And I guess just as a starting point, if we've got people who are watching or listening to the podcast who, haven't kind of come across you before, just tell us a little bit more. What did you study at the university and what are you kind of up to now?
So I come from an engineering background. I did my bachelor in electrical engineering in my hometown in Cairo. And then I went to the University of Huddersfield to do a master's in marketing management. And fast forward 7 years later, I think even more than that, 8 years, around 8 years later, I'm now working in the Netherlands as head of growth for a tech scale-up called Speakap. And it's B2B, and my career so far has been more B2B focused. And yeah, this is where I am.
Fantastic. Excellent introduction. And I know we're going to kind of dig a little bit more into your sort of background in industry and the work that you've been involved in a little bit later on. But we start every podcast, as always, with our greatest Hud story section. So this is very much about kind of reflections on your time at the university and any kind of special memories that you might want to share. And I guess a good starting point, that we always come at for this section is to ask, how did you end up at the University of Huddersfield in the first place?
So, there is a long version and a short version for that story, but for the interest of time, I'll just go ahead with the short version, is that all my life, I always knew that I wanted to work in marketing. Even before I knew what marketing was, I even remember as a toddler, I wouldn't eat unless there was like some TV ads on. Like I wouldn't eat. I had to have TV ads, not movies, not cartoons. It had to be ads. And then I just got good grades in my high school. I was in the scientific track in like math and physics and stuff. So the natural next step was to go into engineering. But I always knew that I wanted to work in business. I wanted to do marketing. So I started doing part-time jobs, internships throughout my university years, even like volunteering, student organizations. And when I got the opportunity to know about Erasmus and Erasmus Mundus scholarships that were for like students or like people from third world countries to come into European universities and study funded by the European Union, and I applied for 9 scholarships actually. I got rejected in 4. I got accepted in 4 but I had to be self-funded. And then the University of Huddersfield was the one where I got accepted for the full degree, and I got quite lucky that this was the one that accepted me, because it was actually a very specialized degree, I would say, because it was kind of recommended for people who are switching their careers or who do not come from a particularly business-focused background. So it kind of felt like this is like a custom-made program for me, and I ended up there.
Wow, fantastic. And I think, a little bit later in the podcast, we're going to talk a bit more about that journey, because as you said, there was kind of a long story and a short story. And I guess in between getting to the university, there were a lot of other steps that kind of took place. So we can kind of come back to that. I guess before we do that, just are there any sort of particular, memories from your time at the university that you'd really like to share on the podcast?
Well, there are a lot of memories. a big portion of them are in like Duke of Tokyo, Revolution, Witherspoons. I don't know if these places are still there anymore. I wouldn't call them memories because a lot of them are still hazy, so I wouldn't be able to remember them fully. No, but seriously though, I think one of the biggest things or one of the highlights of my time there was being involvement with the international student societies. So the Egyptian one I was involved in, of course, but also this got us and got me myself personally to get involved with people from other international student societies. So it was a really fun experience, and it was a great thing to get me involved and to break this ice. I arrived there on my own. I don't know anyone. I don't know what is going on. It was almost my first time living outside of Egypt, so in a very cold country as well. So it was a nice opportunity to get me to just exercise my extrovert self and get to know people and all those good things. So that was also one thing. But I think the biggest highlight of it, or the thing that I hold deep to my heart about it, was this experience of when I took this module of entrepreneurship and ended up in with the support of Dr. Dima Rifai. I think she's not at the University of Huddersfield anymore, but it was me ending up in a Dragon's Den, sort of thing in Beijing, China. Because of that module, because Dr. Dima had nominated me, and I went through the selection process, and it was a very intense program at the University of Bradford, like between the some government body in the UK and the Chinese government, and then ended up going there and like giving press conferences and doing the Dragon's Den itself, and ending up with getting an investment offer. So that was I think the biggest non-educational related experience. I mean, I wouldn't be able to call it non-education 100% because it stemmed out of my entrepreneurship module from my master degree, but it was one of the experiences I will cherish most in my life, and that honestly taught me a lot.
Wow, brilliant. I mean, it sounds like even in that short time at the university, you packed so much in.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think there were a lot of opportunities, and they were all up for grabs, I would say. And I kind of felt like I'm a greedy person in general, so I kind of felt like I want to maximize the time I'm spending there, because I know it's not going to come again. I know it's going to be a once in a lifetime thing. Because I felt like, you know what, I'm done with studying. I cannot study anymore, so I will finish this degree and like just call it a day. But no, I really wanted to maximize the opportunities, do everything I can do, basically squeeze any sort of benefits or advantages out of it. And I have to say that there were many. So
oh, it's fantastic to hear. And I mean, I think, we can kind of come back to some of that stuff you're talking about in terms of taking advantage of opportunities, maybe in our kind of underrated careers advice section a bit later. But I think to sort of come back to what you're saying there, particularly about being, I guess an international student and being on, both a limited kind of time frame for the degree, but also kind of being somewhere totally new for the first time, that adjustment. So much of that seems to link back, as you were saying, to the career journey you've been on, of course, now being based in the Netherlands, having kind of come originally from Cairo, via a number of other countries where you've kind of worked and studied. So let's explore that in a little bit more detail. So you mentioned earlier there was a bit of a long story with how you got to the University of Huddersfield, but I guess there's also a slightly longer story in terms of how you kind of transitioned, as you said, from that original engineering undergraduate degree to kind of getting into the world of marketing. So tell us a little bit about how that kind of journey developed from having originally done the degree on more of a kind of engineering basis, and how did you kind of start that, I guess, pathway into marketing? What did that look like?
So I think I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, I wasn't that happy studying engineering. And I guess a lot of people from a lot of countries would relate to that, because this like funny joke is that if you are from Egypt, or you're from India, or I don't know, like Lebanon and any of those like non-European countries, if you do not, you can either be an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor, or a disappointment to the family. Of course, it's a joke and it's not real, but there is still this underlying feeling that even myself I grew up with, is that well, an engineering degree is the most secure thing, even if I don't like it, even if I'm not passionate about it and I'm not enjoying it. But it is one thing that I can be doing at the moment, and I should be doing because, well, this is what everyone else is doing. But I always knew that I did not like it. I don't want to work as an engineer. I don't want to become an engineer. And I think as a way of sabotaging this path for myself, I made sure that I will never take any like undergrad jobs or like internships, opportunities, traineeships that are in engineering, because I remember like telling myself I want to not be employable when I graduate in the field of engineering, because I knew that maybe maybe I won't be strong enough to say no, I'm not going to work in engineering, I'm going to work in something else. Like if an opportunity presents itself, then I probably would have taken it. So I wanted to like cut it short for myself, and then I ended up like hustling around to get into those student organizations. So I was involved with ISEC, for example. I think it's a global organization. A few people know it. Some local organizations in the Faculty of Engineering in Egypt, where I went. And one thing led to another. Again, just a lot of opportunities. I worked in call centers. Actually, one of my first jobs was working at Vodafone UK. So I was providing customer service to British customers, which was an amazing experience. And I mean, it paid really good money. So that was one of the things that made me go out of my shell and, you know, be more outspoken. It was a nice opportunity for me to practice my English and to speak a lot of English and to get to know the business world. And then fast forward to, I went to India to do an internship for a few months. I was working as a soft skills slash business instructor at a university in the north of India. So that was also an amazing experience. I did a couple of case studies or mini traineeships with companies like Schneider Electric and ExxonMobil. I also did a couple of side hustle jobs, just so, you know, to be able to pay the bills and make some nice money while at the university. But it all was in the fields of sales, marketing, sometimes logistics, commercial operations, all those things that are 100% not engineering. But I also have to say that coming from an engineering background, that gives you some sort of being comfortable with numbers, working with statistics, being comfortable with data, logical thinking. So I think these were benefits that came out of this 5-year bachelor. So I think this is how it started, the transition. And honestly, all these things that I did next to my university studies, they were what I had to show. And I remember writing this in my motivation letter for the University of Huddersfield, is that I really don't have a degree to support this, but this is my passion, and I tried as much as I can to compensate for my lack of academic knowledge of business and marketing by throwing myself out there and trying to harvest this knowledge or those skills from the outside world, so that I'm ready for such an opportunity, and it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know you mentioned in there, obviously, that international experience has been such a big part of that, I guess. So I know kind of when we've talked previously off the podcast, you mentioned that before you kind of got to Huddersfield, there was some, you know, various kind of events that kind of delayed you being able to start on the masters there, and that led to taking on some, some international opportunities kind of within Europe as well. What sort of impact did that have, being able to maybe kind of take on some roles that were more aligned to sort of the marketing industry before you came and did the MSc?
So that was actually, I did one semester. So, well, I got delayed to start my master degree because I had failed one subject in my last year of my last year of my bachelor degree. As I told you, that was like a blow to my face because I was always like an A student. So for me, that's like, how? But it ended up all working out for the best, because instead of starting in September, I ended up deferring my start to January. Which meant that I was going to take a summer vacation, because back then the winter starters would take a summer vacation for 4 months and then do the second semester of their MSc. But I don't know if I had told you this when I was registering after I arrived, and then at Student Affairs they told me, "Huh, it seems like because you did not, for some reason, you were not expected to start now, you did not receive the email that said that we are no longer doing these 4-month internships. So there is no 4 months internship." And then I had to speak with International Student Affairs and be like, well, I expected this. I wanted to get like an internship in the UK or somewhere in Europe. So that kind of like brings all the academic knowledge that I will get in my MSc into the real world and make this experience, as valuable as possible. So I ended up applying for a lot of opportunities. I think I applied for like a couple of hundred internships. And I got accepted in one, except that they wanted me to go there for a year, and it was in Belgium. And then with the support of Professor Radi Haloub, also he left the University of Huddersfield, I was able to properly pause my master degree. And then with the help of Professor John Anker, and I hope if he's listening to this,
he's still there. He's still there. Yeah.
Okay, but if he's listening to this, hello, Professor John Anker. Hopefully, I can meet you soon. But yeah, I was able to postpone or kind of suspend my master degree and my scholarship, and then I went to do this job in Belgium, which was an amazing experience because it was working in like a pan-European company: Belgium, France, the Netherlands, and even Morocco. So it was, and Germany, and it was quite interesting, and I learned a lot. I was reporting directly to the CEO, and it was a huge learning experience for me. The teams that I worked with were amazing, and after that year, it was time to go back to the University of Huddersfield, because if I had stayed any longer, I could have lost my MSc because the program that I started back then was not going to be continued. So that was the last semester in which I could take modules that would actually finish my MSc. So I had to go back, and I was honestly happy to go back. And this is when I got the whole entrepreneurship thing. The entrepreneurship module was not available back then when I started. It was a new module, and I think it was the first time for it being taught at the University of Huddersfield. So it all worked out for the best, because if it wasn't for all these, like this domino effect, I wouldn't have ended up in it. And then I wouldn't have ended up in the whole UK-China program and in the Dragon's Den. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you say, we don't always think about, do we, those kind of little dominoes that knock on and what impact that has. I mean, the entrepreneurship side is really interesting, because I think, as you said, you now looking back, you're really glad that you had the opportunity to kind of participate in that. Tell us a little bit more about how that has kind of, I guess, impacted the work you've done since, because I know you've obviously been working for companies directly within Europe since kind of finishing your degree, but how did that sort of entrepreneurship module and I guess the entrepreneurial mindset, how has that sort of helped the work that you've done generally for other companies?
So I think or digital marketing or demand generation, or however you want to call it, and especially in a fast-paced world in like tech companies and stuff, everyone needs to have some sort of entrepreneurship mindset, because entrepreneurial mindset, sorry, excuse my English, but it's because, well, everything you are doing, it's a project on its own. It's like kind of a mini venture on its own, and you can either be, you know what, I'm gonna follow all the processes, I'm gonna do it step by step by the book, and this could work in some companies, but I would say a minority, and they all have to be like really huge corporates that are like very traditional. But in today's fast-paced world, and if I think the probability of getting ahead is much higher if the person depends on their entrepreneurial mindset and being able to be creative in solving challenges and not play by the rules, and being able to take a challenge, from end to end and wear multiple hats, which is exactly what anyone would do if they have their own company or their own business, is that you will have to wear all sorts of hats to make it work, not just the hat of what you know to do best. And then you learn as you go, and then you make it work. And if a challenge comes up, I mean, you can always say, yeah, you know what, I don't know how to solve this little issue, whether it's a technical issue or a financial issue or a regulatory issue. Or you can say, you know what, I'm just going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to Google some stuff. I'm going to try to ask some people around. I'm going to figure out how it works. And even if it doesn't work out, then I will find another solution for it. And I think this is something, I mean, if you go on LinkedIn, if you look at almost all the job descriptions for all the jobs available, they're always asking for some sort of entrepreneurial mindset, or being able to work independently, or being able to think creatively and wear multiple hats. And all those things, I think they correlate very closely with being an entrepreneur. Or I don't like the word entrepreneur because it's kind of becoming fetishized in today's world. But just being able to work independently and to hustle your way around solving problems, you know.
I think it's such an important point. I think our enterprise team at the university would be really kind of pleased to hear this, because we talk a lot sometimes about that idea of entrepreneurialism, that idea that you can have an entrepreneurial mindset but in a company. It doesn't have to be running your own business. And I think you've articulated that really well. And it's that idea of, as you said, the kind of approaching problems creatively, being able to think from more than one perspective or more than one job role within an organization. But also, as you said, that idea that fundamentally, actually, we're moving towards what's really a project economy. Job titles, a lot of companies now are kind of moving away from very rigid job titles, focusing more on kind of project titles, those type of things. And we're seeing a lot of that stuff in Harvard Business Review and Forbes kind of coming through. So it is really interesting. And it's one of those things where I think, as you say, if you can adopt that mindset as kind of a baseline, as a foundation, you're in a very strong position, whether you are running your own business or whether you're, working directly for companies or as a contractor or those sort of things. It's a really interesting point.
Yeah. No, it is. And honestly, I think, companies would, because look, even though a lot of companies have a lot of money today, even with the recession going on, like the recession is affecting some businesses, but some businesses not. So a lot of businesses have a lot of money, yet they try to be as lean as possible, and they try to be as profitable as possible, and they try to burn as less cash and less resources as possible. So any single employee needs to be able to maximize the value that they are bringing, and that happens by not sticking or like staying in your own lane. Of course, you have to be respectful of the people you are working with and their expertise, and know what you are good at and what you are not good at. But at the same time, in a lot of cases, you will be doing stuff for the first time, and there is no budget to get someone who knows how to do this or have done it before. Or even if there are people who have done this in your company before, yet they are busy with other projects. So like time and resources are very scarce. So you just have to figure it out. And this kind of, I don't know if it's a good word, but it's kind of like a hustle mentality. Just being a hustler, you're just like, I will figure this out. I'm not gonna let this go until I figure it out. Whether it's by, again, learning myself or asking people around, or
yeah, absolutely. As you say, it's a mindset in itself, isn't it? And I think you're right. I think we kind of need to come up with better language, don't we? Because entrepreneurialism, hustle culture, it's kind of, I think you're right to say social media's kind of made it. So actually, sometimes it's not, you kind of think, well, what does that actually mean, in practice? So I think we almost need to come up with a better shared vocabulary for it. But it's a really important point about what that means, I guess, when it comes to being in work and how you can kind of adopt that. Fantastic reflections, Mina. So much already kind of packed into that kind of career, both before and after the degree with Huddersfield. You have touched quite a lot already on some of the key bits, I guess, of advice that have been really valuable to you throughout your career. But we finish the podcast each time with our underrated careers advice section. So this is just another opportunity. If there's any other kind of nuggets of wisdom that you think students, graduates, or anyone else who's watching or listening might benefit from, or anything that you've benefited from in your career that you'd like to share, what would it be?
I think, I don't know if this is appropriate to say out publicly, but seriously, no one knows what they're doing. If you think that those people who are working in those jobs, and even the people who are interviewing you, or who are, your manager or the CEO or the COO, seriously, no one knows what they're doing. No, everyone is just trying to figure it out on the fly, and whether it's going to succeed or not doesn't really depend on whether this person is super smart or not, or this person has done it 100 times before or not. It all depends on their ability to adapt and their ability to try to figure it out on the go, and to just not be demotivated or give up when stuff is not looking too well. But seriously, no one knows what they are doing. And I'm saying this out of experience. Even though I know at work, for example, or in job interviews, sometimes I find myself sounding too confident, and then I find myself also saying it out loud, but like, hey, this is something that I only learned like yesterday, so I am using it today, but it might change tomorrow. I have no idea what I'm doing, but what I know how to do is I will figure it out as it comes, even if I have never done it before. And at the end of the day, we are not brain surgeons, so maybe this podcast is not for people studying like medical degrees. But seriously, no one will die if stuff goes south. What matters is that we are able to adapt and we are able to learn from what happened. But again, no one really knows what they are doing, and everyone is trying to figure it out on the go.
Yeah, and I think it's such an important point. As you say, obviously there are exceptions. Of course, there's exceptions, where you need to be qualified or knowledgeable to a level, because either it might be life or death, or because that needs to happen. It might be if you're an infrastructure engineer or something like that. You couldn't just kind of wing it.
This is
But even then, as you say, there's an element in every job of you don't have all that knowledge straight away going into any project. There are things that you have to adapt to and learn on the fly and pick up. And I think it's such an important point about the mindset needed for that, because it can be very easy to go, oh, this could be quite overwhelming. But actually, as you say, remembering that other people in that position too, senior people, junior people, going through the same thing, it's a quite a good leveler, isn't it? It reminds you that everyone goes through these things. It's not unique to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you have done it before, if you have had some experience, this is absolutely valuable, and it's definitely going to come in handy. It's just a matter of knowing that even if you have done this before, like, this expression of, I have seen this movie before, it doesn't always turn up to be the same type of movie. And you always have to put it in context, because in today's world, it's like doing business is super complex. Making money, generating revenue is super complex. Doing growth, doing marketing, and I'm expecting all the other fields are also becoming super complex with a lot of variables, and it's like 1 million times more complex than it was 10 years ago. So even if you have done this exactly before in a very similar challenge, it might end up being a completely different challenge. So the experience will come in handy. It's just a matter of how to put it in context and how to make sure that you are kind of like humble enough to know that I have to approach this as if this is the first time I'm doing it, and I'm learning as we go. And it's okay if I find that it's overwhelming, or that I don't know what I'm doing, or that I say that I don't know what I'm doing. Like, one of the things that I learned, and I learned it like a few years into my career actually, is that, you know what, there is no shame in asking for help, and there is no shame in raising my hand and saying, yeah, I don't know how to do this. I could need some help with it. I could need some guidance. I could need some mentorship. But I'm willing to go ahead and try to learn it.
Yeah, absolutely. And great advice to end the podcast on there. I think particularly within, a week where we're hearing lots and lots about things like ChatGPT-4, what that's going to do in terms of maybe changing the way that people work. And as you said, that kind of adaptability, or having a mindset that's open and kind of willing to change is so important as the world moves at an even faster pace. So thank you so much, Mina, for your reflections on your career so far. Thanks so much for joining us today. If we've had any students or graduates watching or listening to the podcast who are interested in finding out a little bit more about your work, or what you're up to at the moment, or getting in touch, where's the best place to find you?
I would absolutely love that, and preferably that would be through my LinkedIn. My name on LinkedIn is Mina Kozman, but I guess there could be a few Mina Kozmans. So I don't know if you're going to add the actual profile or how it is, but I would prefer LinkedIn.
Will, that's great. Thanks, Mina. Yeah, we'll pop the URL kind of on the edit. So if you're watching the podcast, you'll see it flash up on the bottom of the screen. And if you're listening, you'll find it in the podcast notes. But that brings us really nicely to the end of the podcast. Mina, thanks so much for giving up your time, becoming the latest member of the Hud Grad Club. And obviously, we wish you well with everything in the future.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure. And hope to see you soon.
Great. All the best. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Enjoyed the podcast? Then go to the University of Huddersfield YouTube channel for all of our future episodes. Subscribe, like, and don't forget to hit the bell button for notifications. If you'd like to be involved in the Hud Grad Club podcast moving forward, please get in touch with us on alumni@hud.ac.uk.